store. He watches me in the audience. He comes backstage. He tells me what a great job I did and how much he loves the joke. 2 years later, he's doing that as his last joke on
anything. That's a regret I have. I really shouldn't have said nothing, because we not in the same league.
And because you finally did it, because you had no other choice, and now that he gone, you gonna act like he wanted to be a movie star. You stop it.
Hate and jealousy. And hate and jealousy is a form of grief.
Listen closely, because what we're about to get into isn't just another celebrity beef. This is deeper. This is about truth, power, and what really goes on behind the smiles and suits in Hollywood. So stay right where you are and watch this video until the very end, because trust me, what Katt Williams just said about Steve Harvey will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about one of comedy's biggest legends. Now, we all know Steve Harvey. The man's face is everywhere. Family Feud, his radio show, motivational talks, best-selling books, you name it. He went from stand-up comedy to being one of the most recognizable voices in entertainment. But Katt Williams just dropped some heavy words that changed the whole picture. According to Katt, the Steve Harvey we see on camera is not the same Steve Harvey behind the scenes. And he's not just saying Steve has flaws. He's saying Steve Harvey is way worse than anyone ever imagined. Let's be real. Katt Williams has never been afraid to speak his mind. Whether he's talking about Hollywood, the industry, or fellow comedians, Katt keeps it raw and unfiltered. And when he speaks, people listen, because he doesn't sugarcoat, he doesn't hold back. And in this case, when he aimed his words at Steve Harvey, it felt personal, like years of frustration and truth finally spilling out. So grab your snacks and stay with me, because this story connects everything: fame, betrayal, success, and the price of staying on top. Katt started by saying something that stopped people in their tracks. He said, Steve Harvey is worse than people think. And when you hear that, you can't help but wonder, worse how? What's really going on behind the image of the smiling host, the suits, the jokes, the self-help speeches about faith and family? Katt didn't just throw shade. He broke it down piece by piece, explaining how Steve Harvey has been playing a long, strategic game, and not the kind that lifts others up, but one that pushes people down just to stay on top. See, for years, fans have known there's tension between Katt and Steve. It's not new. Back in the day, Katt called out Steve for allegedly stealing jokes. He said that Steve took material from other comedians, guys like Mark Curry, and passed it off as his own. Now, in comedy, that's one of the biggest sins you can commit. Your material is your art. So, when Katt said Steve built his success on other people's work, it wasn't just an insult. It was an accusation that hit deep in the heart of what it means to be a real comedian. But what Katt is saying now, it goes beyond stolen jokes. He's saying Steve Harvey built his entire career on manipulation, using people, controlling narratives, and keeping power in his hands no matter who he had to step on. That's not just beef. That's calling out a whole pattern of behavior that's been going on for years. Let's take it back for a second. Steve Harvey didn't start as a TV mogul. He started just like the rest of them. Katt Williams, D.L. Hughley, Cedric the Entertainer, Bernie Mac, all of them. Grinding it out in clubs, performing for small crowds, trying to make their mark. The Kings of Comedy tour was legendary. 4 men, 4 styles, one unforgettable movement in comedy. But what Katt reminds everyone is that even that tour wasn't as clean as it looked. According to Katt, it was supposed to be Steve's tour. But that's not how it went down. Katt says Steve made moves behind the scenes to make sure the spotlight always found him first. Now, Bernie Mac, God rest his soul, was a real one. Everyone in comedy respected him. He came up hard, stayed authentic, and never faked it for Hollywood. And yet, even Bernie had tension with Steve Harvey. There were rumors, whispers that Bernie felt like Steve was undermining him, trying to take opportunities meant for him. And Katt, he didn't forget that. Because to Katt, it's part of a pattern, Steve always finding a way to benefit himself, even when it meant stepping over people he called friends. Katt said something powerful that stuck with everyone. He said, just because a man speaks eloquently doesn't mean he's telling the truth. And that line right there, whew, that hit home. Because if you've ever watched Steve Harvey speak, you know how smooth he is. He can take a story, turn it into a lesson, make you laugh, make you cry, and make you believe he's speaking from the heart. But according to Katt, that's all part of the performance. It's all part of the act. Behind that charm is a man who's not afraid to play dirty if it means staying relevant. And that's where Katt says things get real dark. He claims that Steve's image, the motivational speaker, the father figure, the wise talk show host, is just a mask. Behind it is someone who's been obsessed with control. Katt says Steve has made a career out of aligning himself with people who can help him, then cutting them off the moment they're no longer useful. Think about it. Over the years, we've seen people come and go from Steve Harvey's circle. Co-hosts, comedians, colleagues, people who started close to him but somehow ended up on the outside looking in. Katt's saying that's not a coincidence. It's a pattern. It's how Steve operates. Always making sure he's the one holding the microphone, the one in control of the story. Now, let's talk about how deep this goes. Katt isn't just calling out Steve for being a bad friend or a bad comedian. He's calling him out for being a bad person. That's a big claim. Katt says that Steve's success didn't just come from talent, it came from manipulation. From playing Hollywood's game better than anyone else. From smiling when it mattered and cutting deals in the dark. And according to Katt, that's the part people don't see, because Steve Harvey has mastered the art of public image. We all know the Steve Harvey persona, the sharp suits, the funny expressions, the life lessons about success, love, and faith. But Katt says it's all a setup, that behind the motivational words is a man who doesn't live by them, that the same guy preaching integrity has been making moves that prove the opposite. And if you look closely, there have been moments when the mask slipped, moments when you could see a glimpse of the real Steve behind the laughter. And Katt Williams isn't the only one who's noticed. Over the years, other comedians have spoken about the darker side of Hollywood and the way people in power control who gets to rise and who gets shut out. Names like Monique, Dave Chappelle, and even Kevin Hart have all mentioned how the industry rewards people who play along and punishes those who don't. Katt believes Steve Harvey has become one of those gatekeepers, the kind of person who says he's all about helping others, but secretly makes sure no one else takes his spot. Now pause and think about that, because that's a strong accusation. But when it comes from someone like Katt Williams, you can't just dismiss it. This is a man who's been in the game for decades. He's seen it all, the highs, the betrayals, the backroom deals. Katt's not just some outsider throwing stones. He's been in the same rooms as Steve Harvey. He shared the same stages. He knows how this world really works. And what's crazy is that Katt doesn't even sound bitter. He sounds disappointed, like someone who wanted to believe in the legends but can't ignore the truth anymore. He's not just calling Steve out for personal reasons, he's calling him out because in Katt's eyes, Steve represents everything wrong with the entertainment industry. The fake smiles, the broken promises, the way real talent gets pushed aside for people who know how to play politics. Katt said Steve's rise wasn't organic. That's heavy. He's saying it wasn't just hard work or talent that got Steve to where he is. It was connections. It was manipulation. It was knowing the right people and doing whatever it took to stay on top. That's not the story Steve tells when he's giving motivational speeches, right? When Steve talks about his journey, it's all about faith, hustle, and never giving up. But Katt's saying that's not the full picture. Now, let's not pretend Steve Harvey hasn't had his share of controversy. From his comments on women and relationships to the way he handled certain interviews, Steve's image has taken hits before, but somehow he always manages to bounce back. And that's part of what Katt's pointing out, how Steve always seems to come out clean no matter what happens. It's like nothing sticks to him. And maybe that's not luck. Maybe it's strategy. Maybe it's years of carefully shaping an image so strong that even the truth can't crack it. Katt says Steve is the kind of person who preaches loyalty, but doesn't practice it. Someone who tells others to be honest while hiding his own secrets. And that's what makes this whole situation so wild. Because Steve Harvey isn't just another comedian. He's a brand. He's a movement. He's someone millions of people look up to. So when someone like Katt Williams, another respected, fearless voice in comedy, calls him out, it shakes the room. Now let's not forget the history between these men. They both came from the same roots. They both fought to make it in a tough industry.
They both had to prove themselves on stage night after night. But somewhere along the line, their paths split. Steve became the face of mainstream comedy, family-friendly, business-minded, a man of faith and structure. But Katt stayed raw. He spoke for the people who didn't fit the system, the outsiders, the ones who refused to play by Hollywood's rules. And that's why Katt's words hit so hard, because he's not speaking from envy, he's speaking from experience. He's saying, I've seen what happens behind the scenes. I've seen how people like Steve move. And when Katt talks like that, you can feel it. You can feel the disappointment, the frustration, the truth in his tone. He's not just venting, he's warning people. He's saying, don't believe everything you see. Don't confuse fame with integrity. And that's the real message here. Because when you strip away the celebrity names, the tours, and the shows, what Katt is talking about is something bigger. He's talking about how power changes people, how success can turn authenticity into a mask, how some folks get so used to being in control that they forget what honesty looks like. And while Steve Harvey hasn't responded to Katt's latest comments, silence sometimes speaks louder than words. Because if someone accuses you of being fake, of being a manipulator, of being worse than people think, and you say nothing, what does that really mean? Maybe he's ignoring it. Or maybe he knows Katt isn't lying. Now, fans are split. Some say Katt is just stirring up drama. Others say he's finally saying what people have been afraid to admit. But one thing's for sure, this feud isn't about jokes anymore. It's about truth. And in an industry built on illusions, that truth can be dangerous. So here's the question. Who's really telling the truth? Is Steve Harvey the wise, hardworking family man we see on screen? Or is Katt Williams exposing the real person behind that smile? That's for you to decide. But remember, Katt Williams has never been afraid to stand alone if it means standing on the truth. And before you click away, don't. Stay right here until the very end. Because the deeper you look into this, the more everything starts to connect. The Kings of Comedy days, the quiet tension with Bernie Mac, the power plays in television, the sudden rise to fame. It's all part of the same story, a story that Katt says has been hidden for too long. So maybe it's time to look past the suits, the speeches, and the smiles. Maybe it's time to ask if the Steve Harvey we've been cheering for is really the man we think he is. Because according to Katt, the truth isn't just messy, it's worse than we thought. And that's why this story matters. Because it's not just about comedy, it's about character. It's about what happens when ambition turns into obsession. It's about how far someone will go to stay in control. And if Katt's right, then Steve Harvey's story isn't one of inspiration, it's one of manipulation dressed up as success. So who do you believe? The man who built his empire on charm and confidence? Or the man who's pulling back the curtain to show what's really going on behind it? Stay tuned, because this one isn't over. The truth always comes out. And when it does, it changes everything.
And as the smoke settles, you start to realize this whole thing was never just about two comedians trading shots. This is about legacy, about what we leave behind when the lights go out and the applause fades away. Because no matter how successful you are, no matter how many shows you host or how many suits you wear, your legacy isn't measured by fame, it's measured by truth. And that's the one thing Katt Williams refuses to compromise. He's standing on a stage that's cost him millions of dollars, countless opportunities, and almost his peace of mind. But he still stands. Because to him, silence would mean surrender. And if there's one thing Katt has never done, it's surrender. He said it best himself once. If the truth makes people uncomfortable, that's because they've been living too long in lies. And that's exactly what this moment feels like. The truth cutting through years of Hollywood polish and image control. But to understand Katt's fire, you have to go back. Back to the roots of what made comedy powerful. Back when Bernie Mac stepped on that stage in Chicago and told the world, "I ain't scared of you," and meant it. Back when Richard Pryor stood up and used his pain as a mirror to show America its reflection. Back when Eddie Murphy could make the whole world laugh, not because he was clean or controlled, but because he was real.
That's the cloth Katt comes from. That's the energy he carries. And that's what he says is missing from today's stage. Truth without filters. He remembers how Bernie Mac used to say, Hollywood will love you until they don't. And now, looking at how the industry treats its truth tellers, you can see Bernie was right. Because the same system that smiles at you on Monday will turn around and blacklist you by Friday if you don't play by the rules. And in that system, Katt believes Steve Harvey became the model citizen, the face of compromise, the man who learned how to win every game by never challenging the rules. But Katt, he never wanted to play the game. He wanted to change it. He says that's why he and Bernie Mac always connected, not because they agreed on everything, but because they both came from that same make them laugh but keep it real spirit. Bernie once told him, you can be funny, Katt, but don't ever let them own your funny. And that line stuck with him, because maybe that's exactly what he sees happening now, people letting the system own their voice, own their truth, own their laughter. And when you look around today, you can see what he means. Comedy used to be dangerous. It used to shake the room. Now it's polished, sanitized, rehearsed. People laugh, but they don't feel it anymore. And Katt's not okay with that. That's why when he calls out Steve Harvey, it's not out of hatred, it's out of heartbreak. It's the sound of a man watching his art form lose its soul. He said in one interview, they turned comedy into PR. And when you look at how every talk show, every game show, every special feels the same, you realize he's right. Everyone's afraid to offend, afraid to speak too real, afraid to lose their sponsorships. But Katt, he's already lost everything they could take. So now he's free to say what everyone else whispers about. And that's why people listen. Because in a world full of pretenders, the realest voice always echoes the loudest. Now imagine if Bernie Mac was still here. Imagine what he'd say seeing all this play out. He'd probably shake his head, laugh that deep laugh, and say, I told y'all what was coming. Because Bernie saw it early, how fame changes people, how money rewires loyalty, how friends turn into rivals once the spotlight hits. And that's what makes this so powerful, because Katt isn't just fighting for himself, he's fighting for Bernie's legacy. He's fighting for every comedian who told the truth and got punished for it. He's fighting for the idea that art should mean something. He said recently, if they won't let me in the building, I'll build my own. And that's exactly what he's doing. While others chase talk show seats and brand deals, Katt's building his own lane, raw, unfiltered, and untouchable. He doesn't have a corporate machine behind him, but he has something stronger, the people. Because every time he speaks, it resonates. Every clip, every quote, every moment, people feel the authenticity. They feel the conviction. They feel that he's not performing, he's testifying. And that's what makes this chapter in his journey so defining. Because now, he's not just a comedian, he's a truth teller, a whistleblower, a reminder that in Hollywood, honesty is the last act of rebellion. So when he looks at Steve Harvey, a man with all the success in the world, he doesn't see inspiration, he sees a warning. He sees what happens when power replaces purpose. He sees what happens when the laughter becomes business and the business becomes the goal. And that's the part that hurts the most, because it didn't have to be this way. They could have built something real together. They could have carried the torch Bernie lit and kept the soul of comedy alive. But instead, it turned into competition, into image battles, into headlines, into silence. And that's what Katt refuses to accept. He's saying you can't build a legacy off lies. He's saying you can't call yourself a king when you built your castle on people's backs. And when he says that, it's not just for Steve. It's for every celebrity who forgot what got them there. Because the truth, fame fades, trends die, but integrity, that's forever. And as this story unfolds, people are starting to see that clearly. They're starting to question what's real. They're starting to remember what made them fall in love with comedy in the first place: truth, courage, and connection. So maybe this moment, this uncomfortable, controversial storm Katt stirred up, is exactly what the industry needed: a reset, a reality check, a reminder that sometimes the loudest laughter comes from the realest pain. And maybe that's why people can't stop talking about this. Because somewhere deep down, they know Katt's not wrong.
They know there's truth in his fire. They know he's fighting a battle most people are too scared to even acknowledge. And when the dust settles, years from now, when people look back at this moment, they won't remember the drama or the headlines. They'll remember the courage. They'll remember the man who risked it all just to tell the truth. Because sometimes history doesn't reward the most successful. It remembers the most honest. And that's why Katt Williams' name will always echo, not because he was perfect, but because he was real. Because he refused to bow, refused to break, and refused to be silent. And maybe, just maybe, that's the lesson in all of this. That in a world built on appearances, truth is the only real power left.
Absolutely. Let's continue and take this story deeper, keeping the same dramatic, emotional tone and natural language style that feels like a true commentary. I'll continue seamlessly from where we left off, building toward the full-length flow. Now, here's where things really start to heat up. Because what Katt Williams is revealing isn't just about one man. It's about a mindset, a culture, a game that's been running behind the scenes in Hollywood for decades. And Steve Harvey, according to Katt, has been playing that game better than almost anyone else. But at what cost? That's the question that keeps echoing every time Katt speaks. And it's the question fans can't stop asking after hearing what he had to say. See, Katt doesn't just throw accusations to stir up chaos, he explains the why. He breaks it down like a man who's seen it all and finally got tired of pretending it's okay. He talks about how some people rise to the top not because they're the most talented, but because they know who to please, who to flatter, and when to keep quiet. And that's what he says Steve Harvey mastered. The art of playing nice in public while pulling strings in private. He even said in one of his talks that some people will sell anything for a seat at the table, even their integrity. And when you think about how many deals, shows, and moments Steve Harvey's been involved in, that line hits different. Because maybe Katt's not just talking about Steve, maybe he's talking about what Steve represents. When you look back at the kings of comedy, you can see the tension if you really pay attention. Bernie Mac was raw, unfiltered, from the streets of Chicago, a man who spoke truth even when it made people uncomfortable. D.L. Hughley was the political one, using comedy to talk about real issues. Cedric the Entertainer was smooth, stylish, and loved by the crowd. And then there was Steve Harvey, the businessman, the host, the one always thinking ahead. They were brothers on stage, but off stage, it wasn't always love. Bernie Mac once said in an interview that he felt like Steve was trying to undercut him, trying to take opportunities meant for him. And that's something Katt never forgot. Because to Katt, Bernie was the heart of real comedy, the kind of man who didn't fake it, the kind of man who earned everything he had with truth and grit. And when someone like that felt betrayed, it meant something. Katt has often talked about the pain of watching real legends get overshadowed by those who know how to smile for the cameras. And that's what makes his words so emotional. He's not just gossiping. He's grieving the loss of authenticity in comedy. He's watching people who built their name off honesty get pushed aside by people who play politics. And that's what he says Steve Harvey mastered. The art of playing nice in public while pulling strings in private. Now, imagine this. Two comedians at the height of their fame, both talented, both loved, both respected, but one chooses to keep it real and the other chooses to play the system. That's the story Katt is telling. That's the choice he's exposing. He's saying Steve Harvey didn't just climb the ladder, he pulled it up behind him so nobody else could. And you can feel the frustration in Katt's tone when he talks about it. He says things like, "They tell you to stay humble while they build empires off your silence." That's deep.
Because how many times have we seen comedians or actors vanish after calling out the truth? How many times have we seen people disappear from TV just because they didn't fit the image Hollywood wanted? Katt's been through that himself. He's been blacklisted, criticized, and painted as difficult. But no matter how many times they tried to silence him, he kept coming back. And that's why when he talks, people lean in. Because he's speaking from scars, not ego. He's saying, I know how this system works because I've been chewed up by it. He reminds people that comedy used to be about telling the truth, about speaking for those who couldn't. Guys like Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, Red Fox, Bernie Mac, they didn't hold back. But now, Katt says, it's about branding, sponsorships, and image control. He believes Steve Harvey became the face of that new era, the man who traded raw honesty for network approval. And here's where the emotional part hits. Katt said that when he looks at what happened to Bernie Mac, he feels anger. Not because Bernie didn't succeed. Bernie did succeed. He became a household name. But Katt says Bernie should have had more, that he should have been treated better, that people like Steve Harvey should have stood beside him instead of trying to outshine him. And when you listen to that, it breaks your heart a little bit, because it's not just about money or fame, it's about respect. Then Katt takes it further. He talks about how Steve Harvey built his good guy image, how every talk show, every book, every motivational video was part of the plan. He says Steve became an expert at saying the right thing while doing something completely different behind closed doors. He says, the real ones don't need to preach about integrity. They live it. That line right there, that's pure Katt Williams, cutting, powerful, and unforgettable. He even pointed out that every time controversy follows Steve, it somehow fades. It disappears like it never happened. Whether it's personal issues, messy headlines, or industry rumors, Steve always walks away clean. And Katt says, that's not coincidence, that's control. That's having friends in the right places, knowing how to shape public opinion, and making sure the spotlight never turned the wrong way. But the truth has a funny way of finding its way out, doesn't it? Because no matter how strong the image, people eventually start to see the cracks. And Katt Williams once again is forcing people to look closer. He's saying, stop letting people sell you perfection. Now, a lot of fans might wonder, why now? Why is Katt calling out Steve again after all these years? Maybe it's because he's tired of seeing fake people get praised while real ones get pushed aside. Maybe it's because he knows too much to stay quiet. Or maybe it's because he's ready to remind everyone that comedy is about truth, not control. And when you watch Katt talk about this, you can see the passion in his eyes. This isn't jealousy, it's justice. It's a man saying, if nobody else will speak up, I will. That's what makes it powerful. Because in a world where everyone wants to stay safe, Katt is still willing to take the risk. So now, imagine being Steve Harvey and hearing all this. Imagine hearing one of the sharpest, most fearless comedians of your generation saying you're not who you claim to be. You'd think Steve would respond, right? But so far, he's silent. And that silence feels louder than words, because maybe he knows that responding means opening doors he doesn't want anyone to walk through. But this isn't just between Katt and Steve anymore. It's bigger. It's about the whole system. It's about how success can turn people into something they never meant to be. It's about how power can twist even the kindest smile into a weapon. And when Katt says Steve Harvey is worse than I thought, he's not just talking about a man, he's talking about what fame can do to a soul. So what happens next? Maybe Steve stays silent. Maybe he comes out and defends himself. Maybe other comedians start speaking up too. But one thing is for sure, the conversation has started and it's not going away. Because once someone like Katt Williams speaks truth to power,
people listen. People start asking questions. People start seeing things they ignored before. And that's why this story is bigger than gossip. It's a warning. It's a reminder that not everything shiny is gold, and not every smile is sincere. Katt Williams might be controversial, but he's consistent. He calls out hypocrisy no matter who it is. And this time, he aimed straight at the top. So as we watch this play out, remember, the truth doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs time. And sooner or later, every mask falls off. So stay tuned till the very end, because this isn't over. What Katt just did might be the spark that changes how people see not just Steve Harvey, but the entire culture of fame and control that runs through Hollywood.